The haunted apartment. The stories always start the same. A decision made in haste, a low-budget apartment chosen out of necessity. My experience was no different. The building was old, its facade marred by decades of neglect. Cracked windows, rusted railings, and a faint smell of damp greeted me as I entered for the first time. The landlord handed me the keys without much ceremony. "Third floor, end of the hall," he said, in a tone that betrayed indifference. "Keep to yourself, and don't mind the noises." It's an old place. When I stepped into the apartment, an unnatural chill enveloped me, and a faint sense of unease began to creep in. The walls bore water stains that seemed to form shapes if you stared too long, and the light fixtures buzzed faintly as if straining against an unseen force. The air was heavy, laden with a sense of anticipation, though I convinced myself it was just nerves. From the moment I moved in, I noticed things that didn't quite add up. At first, it was the typical quirks of an old building, groaning pipes, settling wood. But these noises felt deliberate. Tapping at odd intervals, always in the same corner of the bedroom. Whispers that seemed to drift through the vents. One night, I was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps pacing in the living room. Gathering my courage, I ventured out with a flashlight. The room was empty, but the footsteps continued, echoing as if the walker was just out of reach. I started keeping a journal, documenting every strange occurrence, lights flickering, objects shifting slightly from where I left them, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. The nightmares began on the 7th night. In the dream, I was lying in my bed, but everything felt off. The air was thick, suffocating. The walls seemed to shift and pulse, and a dark figure loomed at the foot of my bed. It didn't move, but its oppressive presence made it impossible to breathe. As I tried to scream, it reached out with unnaturally long arms, its clawed hand brushing against my chest. I woke up drenched in sweat, the sensation of its icy touch lingering. I dismissed it as a nightmare, just a product of the eerie atmosphere of the apartment. But the next night, things escalated. As I prepared to sleep, a persistent tapping began in the corner of my bedroom. It was sharper now, as if something was deliberately trying to draw my attention. I ignored it, pulling the covers over my head. But then the bed creaked as if someone, or something, was sitting at the edge. In the waking hours, the disturbances became more tangible. The sound of footsteps pacing in the living room grew louder. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. A mug shifted across the counter. A chair dragged itself slightly out from the table. Shadows danced along the edges of my vision, darting out of sight when I turned my head. The oppressive atmosphere seeped into every corner of the apartment. I began to experience splitting headaches, my mood darkening with each passing day. By the 10th night, the haunting reached its peak. The tapping was replaced by guttural whispers that seemed to rise from beneath the floorboards. I caught glimpses of a shadowy figure lingering in the hallway mirror, its red eyes glowing faintly, before vanishing. My headaches became unbearable and my personality shifted. I was irritable, withdrawn, and consumed by an unshakable sense of dread. Desperate for relief, I turned to a local healer. The woman listened intently as I recounted my experiences, her expression grave. "This isn't just a spirit," she said, lighting a bundle of sage. "It's something darker." She visited the apartment the next evening, walking through each room with a lit candle and murmured incantations. The air grew heavier with each step she took, the flame flickering wildly as if resisting an unseen force. In the bedroom, she paused, her face pale. "This is where it's strongest," she said. "Something was summoned here and it hasn't left. The healer instructed me to leave immediately, refusing to continue until I had packed my belongings. "Whatever it is," she warned, "it's feeding on you. The headaches, the nightmares, your temper, it's all connected. If you stay, it will consume you." By morning, I was gone. My hands trembled as I handed the keys back to the landlord. He sighed and muttered, "Didn't think you'd last?" Curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed him for answers. Reluctantly, he shared the apartment's dark history. A young woman had lived there years ago. Neighbors had reported strange noises, chanting, and screams in the dead of night. She was eventually found dead in the bedroom. She hangs herself. Officially, it was ruled as a suicide, but the whispers said otherwise. Her death marked the beginning of decades of unexplained events. "They say she was trying to summon something," the landlord said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No one knows if she succeeded or if she became part of it." After leaving, I dug deeper into this building's history. There were reports of tenants suffering from vivid nightmares, mysterious illnesses, and sudden disappearances. The original owner of the building was rumored to have been involved in occult practices, using the third floor as a site for rituals. One former tenant described waking up to find themselves standing in the hallway, staring at the apartment door with no memory of how they got there. Another claimed to see shadowy figures standing at the foot of their bed, watching them until dawn. To this day, I'm haunted by the memory of that place. At night, I still feel the chill of its presence, and sometimes, in the silence, I hear it. The faint, rhythmic chant and the voice that echoes in my mind. You cannot escape